there was a great urge from the Chinese side and our side to complete this agreement as soon as possible, and that it can be signed and that we can complete it celebrating our 30th anniversary. This would be the end of the 30th anniversary year. The young generation of China and the young generation of Israel have to reconnect.
Absolutely.
This is my wish to see.
Or is it, as we're told here in Britain? I think essentially. 大家好，我是高志凯，欢迎收看《高谈不论》。今天我们有幸邀请到以色列驻华大使本阿巴阁下 Ambassador. Thank you. Welcome. It's a great honor to have you.
Thank you, Victor. I'm really honored to be here.
Many people in China are talking about the FTA between China and Israel, and there is a great deal of expectation for the FTA. What's your view about the proposed FTA between China and Israel?
We are negotiating this FTA for the last 7 years. It's not something that has emerged in the last couple of months. We were very hopeful that it should have been actually signed a few years back. And with COVID, negotiations were very, very slow, because at the end of the day, we always believe that the best way to negotiate is to sit in front of each other around a negotiation table and not via electronic dimensions. And it was very difficult to continue these negotiations in the last 3 years. But then both sides, I must admit, there was a great urge from the Chinese side and our side to complete this agreement as soon as possible. And our two ministers of economy have decided that it should be finalized by the end of this year, and that it can be signed and that we can complete it celebrating our 30th anniversary. This would be the end of the 30th anniversary year, so it will be a nice conclusion of our celebrations.
Yes. That would be great. I think that will be a major milestone in China-Israeli bilateral relations.
We really are very much prepared for this.
Mm-hmm.
It will be very beneficial that when we sign this agreement, that all duties will be lifted on Israeli goods coming into the Chinese market.
Absolutely. I think it will be very much mutual, yes.
And we expect trade then to increase even further. We just received the information about bilateral trade in the first 6 months of this year,
mm-hmm.
which is quite astonishing, I must admit, in the third year of COVID, that we still managed to see an increase in our bilateral trade. Last year, bilateral trade reached over $22 billion. In half year of 2022, we already see China's exports to Israel have increased dramatically, because we are buying a lot of electric car vehicles now.
And I think China and Israel can really cooperate a lot in creativity, innovation, entrepreneurship. Assume the FTA will be signed smoothly before the end of the year. How do you think China and Israel can cooperate together in, for example, education, focusing on innovation, creativity, new ideas of thinking, working, making things, for example, going forward? I think China can really benefit a lot by close cooperation with Israel in this regard.
So we've been working with China on these innovation activities for many years already. And in 2017, our governments signed the MOU on comprehensive partnership in innovation, which is quite unique. And since then, we have been working even more intensively in various fields, as I mentioned, definitely in agriculture. Second, medical. Third, now energy, which is a new sector that we are trying to work more with China. We have to. We can learn a lot from China. You are doing much better in
mutual learning
in renewables than we are. And education, anything, even fashion, you know. We will have an event in November bringing together Israeli young designers in recycled materials to use in the fashion world.
Israel is a small country but with major impact in the world. Ambassador, you are sure that among the Chinese people there is a high curiosity about what's going on in Israel. In a sense, there is a great deal of appreciation and admiration among the Chinese people about the Jewish culture, Jewish civilization as a whole, and in its turn also for the successes in Israel. Do you have anything you want to say to the Chinese audience or to the Chinese people at large? How to promote, let's say, China-Israeli friendship, China-Jewish cooperation or friendship, for example?
I think that we have done a lot in 30 years. We waited for relations with China for so many years because Israel was the first country in the Middle East to recognize the People's Republic in China, of China. This was already on the 9th of January 1950. Israel was a very young country at the time. We were only 1.5 years old. And at that time, Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, who was the first Prime Minister of Israel, said, we need to have diplomatic relations with China. These were the years that Israel tried to have as many agreements with as many countries around the world, because we were a small country surrounded by enemies, unfortunately. And we looked for friends around the world. And Asia was one of those geographical continents that we looked for, Africa as well, to establish relations with as many countries as possible. So relations with Asia were very important for us. And so we recognized the People's Republic of China in 1950. We really waited for these relations to be established. And I can testify for myself. I went to university and took up Chinese studies. This was, sorry for disclosing my age, but this was at the late 70s, okay? Late 70s. We established relations only in 1992. Why go and study Chinese in Israel at the late 70s already?
Thank you for your interest in Chinese culture. Yes.
We always had this interest about Chinese culture, ancient civilization, because we are ourselves an ancient culture and ancient civilization. So Israelis waited for relations to be established. And when the bottle was opened finally, yes, we fast tracked, right, and ran really a marathon, both of us, China and Israel, to establish a good foundation for bilateral relations in any sector possible, yes, political, economic, academic, people to people, cities to cities, parliaments to parliaments, everything. We just touched on every sector possible and established good foundation.
That's really great news. I remember you once also mentioned that university to university cooperations between Chinese universities and Israeli universities are also flourishing. Is that right?
Unfortunately, in the last 3 years, we couldn't do much because of COVID, and I do hope that when the borders are lifted, students' exchanges can resume, and that Chinese students continue going to Israel despite COVID, because we lifted restrictions already 2 years ago. But I'd really like to see the Israeli students coming back to China, to all universities. We had students all over China studying language, mainly. So we really managed to do a lot in 30 years. Just think about trade, when we established relations with China in 1992, our bilateral trade was fractions
Next
of
to
percentage,
zero. Yes.
next to zero. And now we are talking about over 22 billion.
Absolutely, yes.
So these are
and I would
dramatic,
say the Chinese demand for many things made in Israel will be increasing, mainly because I think in advanced agriculture, for example, in terms of water use, desertification, etc., there is a lot of things that China can really learn from Israel.
We've been working with China on all these, in all these sectors already for many years, and we are happy to continue. So the next 30 years, I think we should concentrate a lot on people-to-people relationship, and really work on the good foundations that were laid. But understanding each other is something very important. And unfortunately, the last 3 years, when we couldn't travel
in between, yes.
We lost a lot of these understandings of each other. And COVID had a major impact on our society as well, like many other societies. And 3 years is a very long time, and we need to reconnect.
If there is one place in China which you have not visited, or you want to visit the most eagerly, what will be that place in China?
Dunhuang Caves.
Dunhuang.
Yes.
I love Dunhuang here now. I hope if arrangements can be made, I'll be very happy to travel to Dunhuang with you. It's truly a fascinating site.
Yeah. Yes. This is my dream. And twice I was already
invited. Arrangements were made.
I made arrangements and then had to postpone, not to cancel. Yes.
Your dream will become true.
I hope so.
Sooner rather than later. Yes.
So just one last line about the next 30 years, maybe, of our bilateral relations. So I think, as I said, people to people, the young generation of China and the young generation of Israel have to reconnect.
Absolutely.
This is my wish to see.
Absolutely.
We had this before. We used to have what we call the future generation of young Chinese going to Israel. There were a couple of groups like this that we invited from different sectors. Yes. I hope we can resume these visits because at the end of the day, only if you come to Israel or you come to China, you can really understand things. Otherwise, these are too theoretical. There are a lot of academicians in both our countries that do research on, you know, the history of our two ancient civilizations.
Absolutely.
And we had interactions in the past between Jews and Chinese. Jews lived here already
more
in
than
the
1,000 years ago.
Yeah, in the Tang Dynasty in Kaifeng, and then the Silk Road. The Silk Road probably brought a lot of Jewish.
Absolutely.
There are all these relics and historical scripts that would talk about these Jewish tradesmen coming through the Silk Road from the West to China. So to do more research and to learn more about the interaction that our old civilizations had in the past. We are both peoples that admire books.
Absolutely.
We are both peoples that use languages that were used
education,
by our ancestors thousands of years back. Just think about
amazing.
this,
You're
right?
You're right.
And the Confucian norms are quite similar to the Ten Commandments, for example. Yes.
More moral, kind of
the moral
high ground, etc. Yes.
Right, and respect of the elderly, respect of your parents. This is something that we find lots of commonalities between Judaism and Confucianism. So I would really like to see more interactions between our peoples on these grounds.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have great confidence that China-Israeli relations will really further improve and increase. especially after the signing of the FTA agreement. So we really look forward to that. Thank you very much, Ambassador.
Thank you.
It's a great honor.
Thank you, Victor. It was great being here
Yes.
and chatting with you this morning.
Thank you.